soma, soma. Usiache kusoma, soma.
Sisi watu wa Mombasa tunakwambia Mheshimiwa Ruto, rais wetu, tunataka kujua share yetu ndani ya bandari ya Mombasa ni nini. Tunataka kujua.
Sisi viongozi tumesimama imara kuhakikisha kwamba bandari haitabinafsishwa, lakini sisi peke yetu haitawezekana mpaka tuungane na nyinyi.
Kuna watu wanataka kuchukua bandari kuifanya privatize, lakini wanatufanyia kizungumkuti, wanatubadilishia lugha. Wanasema tufanye privatize, tunafanya concession.
Mkiona tunazungumza, hatuzungumzi kwa sababu hata yetu sisi. Tunazungumza kwa sababu ya, hata si kwa sababu ya hawa watoto. If we fail to put our foot in now, the next generation that will come in watatukuja kutuzungumza sisi. Ya kwa lao mimi ningelikuwa ni Abdul Swamad ningezajaribu kupinga.
Tukiongea juu ya mambo ya concessioning ya bandari ya Mombasa, county government ya Mombasa mpaka iyo mshikadau pale.
It is primitive and backwards for anybody to imagine that any region of Kenya cannot get development on account of how they voted.
Wewe rais enda msituni, utafute huko ile watu walipotea mizio ile yote unaweza lete, chukua, tafuta na ukaunganisha Kenya, na kwa sababu hao wanalipa kodi uwafanyie kazi. Lakini ngome lako la Mount Kenya na Rift Valley ikuwa inachungwa.
Wale ambao wanasema ati watu waangaliwe na macho mengine tofauti, it is not right. When elections come, we wear our jerseys. Wewe unavaa jezi yako ya Arsenal, wewe unavaa Man U, mimi ni mtu wa AFC Leopards. Tunapelekana, ikiisha tunarudi kufanyia wananchi kazi for 4 years, for 5 years.
Wananikashifu mimi ya kwamba ninakumbusha rais ya kwamba hata tukipeana kazi tukumbuke zaidi wale walisimama na sisi.
There are some people who are agitating for the mountains isolation, zoning the mountain which is part of this country, and wanting the mountain to speak on its own is actually very primitive and backward.
Without peace, it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, how you live, which tribe you speak.
Kenya is one nation, and I'm here to preach unity so that everybody in Kenya, unless the constitution says otherwise, everyone in Kenya has a leave to remain in this country as per our constitution.
Wafikirie Kenya kwanza in their heads so that we can have peace.
No Kenyan should be made to feel guilty for the political decisions they make.
Nafasi ya kazi ikipatikana, kwanza tuangalie wale ambaye tunaamini na walitupenda na tulikuwa natembea nao pamoja.
Every time I have heard regarding the deputy president make that statement, me I understand what he's saying. He's not saying that all Kenyans don't deserve services. He's saying we will give all Kenyan services, but the determination, the people who run the structure that gives all Kenyan services, 47% of that structure is us.
Kwa hivyo wale wanataka kuchochea kuleta uhasama between the deputy president and our president, nataka niwaombe tuache hiyo barabara. Mimi I was a speaker in the Senate wakati hii maneno ilikuja. It made my work very difficult trying to balance. Kwa sababu sasa itafika mahali unaanza kusema hao ni watu wa deputy, hao ni watu ya president. We don't want to go that direction again.
Kwa hivyo kazi yake ameishika, ameirinda, na mtu akiwatanganya hawa watu wa magazeti kwamba kuna vita kule Central, kule hakuna vita hata kidogo, na naibu wa rais ameshika na yeye ndio in charge, na hatuna wawili na hakuna vile tutakuwa na senge wawili kwa wakati moja.
Ukimaliza Mount Kenya kutafuta wale walikuwa wamepotea njia, kuja tutafute sisi pia wale walikuwa wamepotea njia, tuwapatise kwa jina la Baba, la Mwana na Roho Mtakatifu, si mtaka kitu, tuweke kwa laini na nyuma ya rais.
Your Excellency, don't worry about the noise. Do your bit as you deal with the base, while the president also reaches out uko nje.
There will be no division in this government. President William Ruto and I talk the same language. We consult, we agree, and we move on.
right, that is the soapbox, and of course what has been happening in the week and over the weekend as well, just sentiments shaping up the conversation around the political affairs in the country so far. And I wanted to show you also the editorial cartoon that also has captured what the president or the deputy president has been speaking about, the shareholding. One Kenya Kwanza government listed at Nairobi Security Exchange. That is what Garo has drawn today as well. The shareholders, Victor had drawn this earlier, label is being now rubbed off. Will it shake off from the clouds that has been hanging heavily on Kenya Kwanza right now? And what does it portend, especially for the unity of Mount Kenya? This is what is on the front page of the Standard this morning. Facing Uhuru, a Damascus moment, is it? After spending 5 years bashing his predecessor, the president and his deputy appear to have a change of mind and are heaping praises on a man they have loved to hate. What is afoot and why the change? That is the burning question that you have the answers on page 6 of the Standard this morning. We just want to clear this from our way before we buckle down to discussing what is happening on the region and internationally as well. Let me just pick up with you first of all, Professor Peter Kagwanja, facing Uhuru and the sudden change and the Mount Kenya unity as well, and the shareholder sentiments. Is he ruining the day when he meant this particular, or made such a statement? Because he's been very persistent with it all through.
I think the point is that one has to understand deeply, in a very deep sense, the politics of Mount Kenya and who are the actors. And I'm happy to have Kiongozi here, because his main vote come from Mount Kenya, and therefore he has a very good knowledge of the inner workings of Mount Kenya politics. In 2022, there were two main actors. It was Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. But there was a third actor that is often taken for granted. That's the Kikuyu voter, or Mount Kenya voter. And Mount Kenya voter is very, very dependent many a times from their leadership. And that's a fact that most people overlook. And Mount Kenya voter is very wise. They know that they have to vote together, otherwise they will be irrelevant. And therefore, in 2022, the decision was that Uhuru had not served the people well. Don't mistake me. Uhuru, as a development leader, did better than any other leader I know of after independence. Now, we can say all things about him, but you can never forget that he's the one who gave us the railway, the speed railway. Just the Moroccans will never forget Mohammed V, that he gave them the speed train that is moving at 320 kilometers per hour. Uhuru gave us a train that is moving for 120 kilometers per hour, and when it is put on electricity, it will move us from Mombasa to Nairobi within 2 or 3 hours. Now it is moving us for 5 hours with diesel. So we'll never forget that he gave us an expressway where you move from one corner of Nairobi to the other in 8 minutes. Right? 8 minutes. Where you used to take 1.5 hours. You can't forget those things. So he's the father of modernization together with Kibaki. Basically took from where Kibaki was to, he shot our electric bills and so on, electricity connection. We, in sub-Saharan Africa, we're the most connected country. You can never forget that. And that was during his time. We are now at 77% connection in rural areas. Tanzania, even South Africa is not as connected as we are in terms of electricity to rural homes and so on and so forth. So as a person of development, that's it. But politics is usually local. And the local people felt that he did not support them. Listen to the songs of the Kikuyu musicians. And then you see the localized notion of failure. You do not support it. Maybe that does not go well with the national, but all politics is local. That's what Mandela told us. And therefore, by 2022, the Kikuyus were saying, we need somebody who looks after us. And that's where the bottom-up thing, ideology picked up. Because ideology, bottom-up is basically localization of politics. Simple and clear. And therefore, in 2022, Ruto won and came to the top as the kingpin of Mount Kenya because the people voted for him. But the idea of kingpinship here is not the way Raila is the kingpin of rural politics. It's very different. This is that your position and the Kikuyu position or Mount Kenya position are coming together. And that coming together is what made Ruto the kingpin of Mount Kenya politics. So when we say Jubilee has to change and align itself to Ruto, they are not aligning literally to Ruto, they are aligning to the person that the Mount Kenya people support. But when all these things are now going on, this standard of living or level of living, the poverty increasing and all this increasing, there is now a search of hearts. Is this where we voted right or what should happen? And therefore, the Mount Kenya leadership itself, which is now UDA, is beginning to look as well, is this the right place to go to? And let truth be said, the sentiment is turning radically back to Uhuru. So how do you go about this? Two, at the same time, on the other side, the rural leadership is wooing Ruto, and he's spending much of his time there. And there's a feeling that, did we make a mistake? And I think the man of the moment, take it from me, the man of the moment is Rigathi Gachagua. That shift has basically jolted Mount Kenya politics. And it is now about unity of the region. Not in a chauvinistic, regional, localized politics, but in terms of trying to ensure that your relevance, your stock, is still fetching what it needs to fetch in national politics. I think Mount Kenya does not want any isolation, does not want to be isolated from here. And it is within that matrix that we are going to see now the evolving. Uhuru is back, he's relevant. But how is he going to shape the politics now that he's a retired president? That's a big question. Two, Mount Kenya did not have a kingpin in ethnic terms, because the kingpin is Ruto. He was the one who was elected by the people. So what is that's going to happen? So the turning of bringing Gachagua and Uhuru together in the imaginations of people, because I'm not sure at this juncture it's practical. It is not. It does not happen practically. But the sentiment that you can bring Uhuru and so on means that the many Uhuru people who are in the cold after they lost this election in Azimio have a chance to come back into politics. That is the galvanizing idea, that it is possible for those who are in the cold and those who are in the government to come together. And the fact that Gachagua has said this is possible, that Munya can also be here, Maoka Maore can also be here, and we don't need to bash Uhuru. We don't need to spend every of our time mentioning about what mess he did. That is going to shift politics. And the politics in Mount Kenya is shifting. But the question is what does this mean for 2027? Who are going to be winners and losers in 2027? That I can't predict at this moment.
Well, too early to call. I think when we're discussing about 2027, let's just wrap it up with Naomi Damba and Yusuf Hassan briefly.
I'm not involved with the local politics as much as my friend Kagwanja is. I'm looking at it now, and I'm looking at the future of Kenya. And out of all the vice president we have had from Jomo Kenyatta era to now, nobody has select to use the kind of words that this DP is using. And sometimes you wonder if it's a DP for Mount Kenya or it's a DP for Kenya. And secondly, Dubal, irrespective of how you feel about Uhuru, and I'm very happy that Peter Kagwanja mentioned some significant development that Uhuru brought to this country. Uhuru is revered beyond Mount Kenya because of the role that he has played. You know, Uhuru brought the Western people together in the fold. And he went and did things that his father was not able to do. Instead of trying to woo Raila, he focused on development and then realized the role that Raila has played. Then he also focused on the imagery, not only substantive development, the rail system, the transportation, where Kibaki left, but the image of the country, foreign policy, where he had substantial development in that area. And Kenya was revered, respected around the world, the fourth largest economy in East Africa, and the largest one of the largest economy in the continent of Africa. No, so where did Uhuru go wrong? That can promote people to go and act the way they did against the property of the Kenyatta. George Washington was not a perfect fellow, but George Washington is revered in the history of America. Moi was not a perfect leader, but we honor him by the time he passed away. With Kenya honor him and Kenya respect him. How in the world did we turn around and do that beast-like behavior against the former president family? Those are the questions. And so Mount Kenya has to be part of the larger Kenya, not collection group of people near the mountain. That's what's going to develop the whole country. And people like my father died for independence of this country. There were a lot of people that did that. And therefore, we need to respect all that. In the future of this country, we have to do that.
All right, thank you. Yusuf Hassan. Just briefly, on the Mount Kenya unity, if you have any sentiments on that as well.
Well, I think the Mount Kenya region is one of the most complex and sophisticated regions of our country. So it's not easy to really pigeonhole them by describing them in a particular way. But I've had the privilege of and the trust of that community because I have been successively elected in Kamkunji for the last 4 elections as an MP because of the confidence that they have in me. But I think that they're a community that thinks deep. They're a community that are quite democratic in their approach to politics and leadership. And I think in the last election, we saw that in action, given the fact that the president of the country, who was my party leader, on whom I have a lot of respect, was leading. And he was not able to lead them. He was not able to sell them his vision because they disagreed with him. And they opted for an alternative, which is electing President William Ruto with a very big majority, overwhelmingly. And this is what they do. They sit, they discuss, and they make a decision. Much of what I'm seeing here is, in the media, in what is happening now, is politicking. And obviously there are question marks of what next for that particular community, given their number and their resources. What role should they play in this country? How is their interest been affected, and so on? And I think there's a lot of discussions, and the political elite is trying to push them into a particular box so that they can move together. But I'm certain that at the end of the day, this is a community that will make a decision on its future role in Kenya, which is really critical. They are one of the important pillars of our country and society. And I hope that they would make decisions that would be good for the unity of the community, but also good for the future of our country.
Indeed. Thank you. All right, we're going to turn the crack right now to what is happening currently in Israel and Gaza, where Israel hammered the Gaza Strip on Tuesday with the fiercest airstrike in its 75-year conflict. with the Palestinians razing entire districts despite a threat from Hamas militants to execute a captive for each home hit across the barrier wall enclosing the coastal enclave. Israeli soldiers collected the last of the dead 4 days after Islamist Hamas gunmen rampaged through towns in the deadliest attack in Israel's history. Israel has vowed to take mighty revenge, calling up hundreds of thousands of reservists and placing Gaza crowded home to 2.3 million people and a total siege. Israel's embassy in Washington said the death toll from the weekend Hamas attack had surpassed 1,000, dwarfing all modern Islamist attacks on the West except for 9/11. The victims were overwhelmingly civilians gunned down in homes, on streets, or at an outdoor dance party. Let's just look at it.
This is the sound of the fiercest Israeli airstrikes into Gaza in the 75-year history of its conflict. Israel said on Tuesday it had reclaimed control of the Gaza border, despite a Hamas threat to execute a captive for each home hit without advance warning. Israel has vowed to take its mighty revenge since gunmen rampaged through its towns, leaving streets strewn with bodies in by far the deadliest attack in its history. Hundreds were killed in the Hamas attacks, according to Israeli media, dwarfing the scale of any past attack by Islamists apart from 9/11. Scores of Israelis were taken to Gaza as hostages, with some paraded through the streets. Israel has called up hundreds and thousands of reservists and placed the Gaza Strip, home to 2.3 million people, under a total siege. And in Gaza, whole districts in the enclave have been flattened. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed, according to Gaza's health ministry. This is the moment a nurse in Al Shifa hospital in Gaza City found out her husband, also a medic, was among the deceased. My husband has been martyred, people, she shouts as she walked to break the news to her daughter, who cries and hugs her mother. At the morgue in Khan Yunis Hospital, medics called for relatives to pick up bodies quickly because there was no more space for the dead. The United Nations said nearly a tenth of the population have fled their homes in Gaza since the start of the hostilities. This woman and her family are one of them. What is our fault? What did my children do, she says. At one point, the Israeli military advised Gaza's civilians to flee to Egypt, then backtracked, confirming that the crossing was closed and there was no way out. Israel's next move could be a ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, a territory it abandoned in 2005. Israeli armored vehicles were seen gathered near Gaza border on Tuesday. The total siege it announced on Monday would block even food and fuel from reaching the Strip. Israeli military spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said early on Tuesday there had been no new infiltrations from Gaza since the previous day. Israeli leaders will now have to decide whether to constrain their retaliation to safeguard the hostages. Hamas spokesperson Abu Ubaidah issued the threat on Monday to kill one Israeli captive for every Israeli bombing of a civilian house without warning, and to broadcast the killing. Western countries have strongly backed Israel. Arab cities have seen street demonstrations in support of the Palestinians. Iran, Hamas patron, celebrated the attacks. But on Tuesday, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei denied playing a direct role in them.
In a stern warning to Hamas, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday said that, quote unquote, though Israel did not start this war, but we will finish it. As part of its retaliation against Hamas, Israel has mobilized 300,000 troops. This is the largest mobilization since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when Israel called up 400,000 reservists. Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us. This is what he says. Listen in.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless. Once the Jewish people were defenseless. No longer. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling, slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people and Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it is fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Israel will win this war. And when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins.
And young Israeli reservists queued up at Paris main airport on Tuesday to fly back home, speaking of the shock at the Hamas attacks and determination to fight. Israeli media said deaths from the Saturday's Hamas attack had reached 900, mostly civilians gunned down in homes, on streets, or at a dance party.
Oui, je pense qu'on était bien préparé à l'armée après 3 ans de service militaire et j'ai vu beaucoup de trucs. Je pense que je suis bien prête pour la guerre et Dieu est avec nous et tout va bien se passer et voilà.
J'ai pas eu de papier, mais c'est-à-dire tous mes amis, ils ont reçu un message sur WhatsApp et ils se sont tous déplacés dans l'instant. Actuellement, ils sont tous équipés, ils sont tous, c'est-à-dire ils ont déjà commencé le travail, quoi. C'est-à-dire, donc, faut les rejoindre, c'est tout.
I've been in Vietnam, and after I heard about all the occasions, I head to Bangkok. And then I tried to find the fastest flight to Israel. It was here in France, and just the fastest that I could be in Israel. So that's the reason I came to France.
Of course, that all those stories set the pace for our conversation. But before we also just buckle down to discuss this as well, we have South Africa, where Pretoria has offered to mediate to try to end the devastating war that has erupted between Hamas and Israel, and which so far, as we've mentioned, killed well over 1,000 people on both sides in just 2 days. But does the ANC government really have the diplomatic skills, the clout, and the impartiality to be an honest broker? That is a probing question. And is a conflict anywhere near ripe for mediation anyway? There is potentially an opportunity, as with Ukraine, for South Africa to use its goods offices with one side, working together with other parties, because it's a bit like Ukraine. It's not going to be one set of processes that are going to lead to a resolution. It's different groupings potentially working together or coordinating at any rate. That might help, but we'll want to interrogate that also with our panelists this morning. All right, so let me just also begin with introducing Irungi Houghton as well. Will take us through some of these sessions as well with our panelists, beginning from a humanitarian point of view, because we've had the defense minister, that is Yoav Gallant, indicating that what Hamas has done, it's like a human animal. It's never happened in the history of Israel. It's very barbaric. And so now he's commanded that there has to be a blockade where there is no entry of food, no entry of medical supplies, or even now the distribution of electricity. So they're actually in the dark. And many people also are raising concerns and hesitations around this. They're saying this is a violation of the international humanitarian law, or just international lower as well. So I want us just to begin from there, and what has been your assessment since the beginning of this particular operation, the Al-Aqsa storm, as they call it?
So good morning, viewers, and good morning to panelists, and also Dibal. Possibly good afternoon, given that I've come in at 7 o'clock. My apologies. Let me start by just saying, how distressing these scenes are in many ways. I mean, we are seeing not just a escalating military situation that, as you've said, has seen close to 2,000 deaths on both sides, and the amount of devastation, I think, is just shocking and very disturbing. Ultimately, I guess we will have to push as an international community towards a diplomatic resolution of this issue. It cannot end in a war situation. I think the dangers of that are very, very dire for not just for the region, but I think even for internationally. I think the concern has been really the deliberate targeting of civilians by both sides. I think many of the deaths are not soldiers. They are civilians, they are families, they are young people. We have to demand a cessation of hostilities as quickly as possible. I think the comments by the Defense Minister Gallant were not very gallant. In fact, in many ways, they were very worrying. I mean, the idea that Gaza, many of us within Amnesty have been pointing out for many years now that the occupied Palestinian territories are really open-air prisons, and the constant encroachment into Palestinian land is causing the kind of tension that leaves 50% of the population poor, many of them young people, but essentially these are open-air prisons that are just unworkable from an economic point of view. So therefore, there are a number of things that can I guess, can pull us away from what is being declared as almost a world war. I mean, I think the language that is coming from the Prime Minister of Israel is very much that this is a war against a war to protect civilization. And I think we have to challenge this idea that it should embroil the entire region and the international community. So I think the first thing is, de-escalation of military incursions. I think the stopping of targeting of civilians in terms of the aerial bombings on both sides. The taking of civilians as captives, as hostages is, tantamount to a war crime, and therefore people need to be released. And I think what we need to see is, as quickly as possible, is diplomatic initiatives to try and bring this back into a political solution rather than a military one. And in this sense, although I think it will be, I like the energy and the passion and the leadership of the South African government, but I think it will probably take more than that to bring this to an end.
Right. Yusuf Hassan, do you think that also Kenya was quick off the mark to try and condemn this particular war, where they were siding and they're saying it's against Israel, and condemns the attack against Israel, and regrets the carnage and senseless loss of lives while urging peaceful resolution to crisis? Was it too early to show our leaning, especially with that particular statement?
Well, I must say that the statement that we made was a clear indication that we do not have a national, cohesive foreign policy based on principle and values, given the fact that the Israeli-Palestinian issue is a complex issue. It's an issue that is at the international level, has been discussed, and it requires much more than just condemning one side or the other. What we needed to do is to have a balanced, even-handed position based on principle. For example, do we recognize that there is a historical problem in that region that needs to be resolved? Do we recognize the right of the Palestinians for self-determination? And do we still believe in the two-state system? Because that statement clearly shows that, in fact, we do not believe that there is a problem in the Middle East and in this region, and that this problem needs resolution. There are hundreds of UN Security Council resolutions, UN Security General Assembly resolutions demanding that Israel should accept the rights of the Palestinians and should remove the occupation. That has not been highlighted in this report issued by the Kenyan government, if you compare it to the African Union, which was very categoric and balanced. Tanzania, South Africa, all these countries have taken a very principled, and the African Union have taken a principled position based in the historical political context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I wanted to just go back, even in your presentation here, all the clips that you have shown are representations of the Israeli position. You hear the Israeli president, prime minister declaring war. You're hearing reservists coming back from Europe and America to go and fight in this conflict. And therefore, this dehumanization.
There's a biasness that
yes,
really
is that what we are telling the world is that the people of Palestine do not matter. They do not have a right. They do not have the right to self-defense, and that they are condemned either to exist under a repressive colonial system, or if they resist, they are described in terms like human animals and savages. And when you start describing people in those terms, and the prime minister of the country, the president of the country, of a powerful country, because even the title is Israel versus Gaza. These are not equal terms. Gaza is a refugee settlement of 2.3 people who have been displaced from their land because of the creation of the Israeli state. They are completely under siege on land, on sea, and by air. They cannot get out. It is a concentration camp. It is a pressure cooker, which those people have no right. And now the Israeli defense secretary says publicly on television, and apparently his mother was a Holocaust survivor, says we're going to close all the borders. We're going to put Gaza under siege. No water, no electricity, no supplies, a complete siege. What about the 2.3 million civilians that are there? Women and children. This is a major violation of international law. It is also the start of a war which would commit a lot of crimes and mass atrocities against the people of Gaza. It's not an equal relationship given the fact that Israel is a major military power with nuclear capabilities and with the strongest army in the region. So this is not as if you're talking about two Hamas militants are non-actors, non-state actors. They're not a legal entity. And instead of going for whoever had committed those crimes, this is a collective punishment. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable in international law. It is unacceptable in today's world. And I think we're going to, if this war is not going to be stopped immediately, and diplomatic efforts are not open, we are going to witness a genocide against the Palestinian people.
And so we are stepping also to a storied history about this particular warring conflict between Israel and Palestine. There has been on the table the two-state solution that has never been effected. Maybe that will have brought some remedial measure and a semblance of stability as well in the region. But now it has seemed this particular operation has been in the offing for the last 1 year, according to what experts are saying. And now Saturday was it? We have the Al-Qasr storm. Here we are now in a war. What does it portend, especially? Maybe you can hark back to the history, but especially to the multi-front war, because you can see other regions, the shelling that now we can see arcing also to Lebanon, where we have the Hezbollah, and the Hezbollah also retaliating because the border has been attacked by the shelling or the rockets from Israel. And there is the north as well that is also, being shelled. What does it portend in terms of multi-fronts? Iran has come out to be very categorical that we have not in any way sponsored what is happening in Israel, or this particular war between Israel and Palestine, or Gaza Strip that is under contention. So the fact is, they're not really sponsoring, but he is also lauded what Palestine is doing to Israel. That is Ayatollah, the president of Iran. just give us a perspective of history, where we're coming from. This, I know, this is like the 7th, attack in the long decades of this warring faction that has been going on.
I think the most important thing is to look at the nature of war. I think it's the late 1990s, one of the authors came up with the traditions of war and how war has mutated. It was initially a very gentleman's affair, where you decided where you're going to fight. You put fighters on one side, and the civilians are observers, just like a normal soccer match. So civilians were there, and the Red Cross was basically born out of that. That the civilian casualties, or the soldiers who were casualties on both sides, the Red Cross would come and help. That was the context in which our world was born. And in came Hitler and Mussolini, and brought in the concept of total war. And the concept of total war is that there's now nobody innocent. And the British were shocked to find that the German submarines are sinking ships that are trying to take children to safety in Canada. They are sunk in the middle of the Atlantic. Children. And you are aware that the ship are full of children, and you sink them in the middle of the sea. Then you turn the technological sophistication of the time into a killing technology, where you get people and put them in gas chambers and just kill them. So that war is no longer war, it's a killing industry. And that transformation of that concept of total war really changed our world. And then came September 11, where the mighty also cry. And that the penetration of America and the destruction of the Twin Towers and changed the face of war. And when George Bush talked about the faceless enemy, he was simply telling Francis Fukuyama and the others that the power does no longer belong to those who have the nuclear arsenals and so on. And what we're now witnessing in Ukraine versus Russia is simply that victory has become increasingly elusive. It's increasingly elusive that at what point will Russia declare victory over Ukraine? And when will the world say Ukraine has been defeated? It's impossible, because the nature of war has changed. And I think this is important for Israel to understand. And it's also important for Kenya to understand that, one, it is okay to align yourself to any force. But when we are presiding over a country like Kenya, which is multi-religious, multicultural, everything, because we are on the fault line of cultures as Kenyans. We are not like possibly other countries in Africa, Zambia and others, which are more or less homogeneous, Christians, homogeneous, Africans and this and so. Here we are on the fault line. Our capital is actually our capital of the world in the south. Therefore, we need to be a little bit more cautious, maybe think along the lines of Switzerland. You can help, you can act in the world, but you don't look like you have already taken sides. We see majority of Kenyans are Christians. Therefore, when you say we support Israel, definitely you carry a lot of Kenyans with you. But at the same time, you lose the bulk of Africa. And therefore, our president finds himself pitted against the chairman of the African Commission, Musa Faki. And now the world has two images of extremists. One is the one holding the African position, and the Kenyan basically going to the extreme end, and it doesn't make us look good at all, because we are supposed to be the Switzerland of Africa. And where Switzerland of Africa is, we are aware of the fault lines within our country. The whole north of our country is Muslim. The whole coast is largely Muslim. Many of our people within the highlands are Muslims. I personally grew up within a Muslim community in Maragua. So we must be sensitive about who we are, so that when we are projecting ourselves to the world, we don't come like this Bible Belt country in Africa. We are not a Bible Belt country. We have our Muslims and we have our Christians. We have our traditionalists and people. So we are looking bad, because we were not sensitive about the situations. Because situations don't just erupt, as Mheshimiwa Yusuf has put it. I mean, Gaza is a product of a certain history. Israel itself is a product of certain history. And they are both histories of dehumanization. Whether it's Israel dehumanization, Gaza is dehumanization. What can you do? You come in as a mediator. South Africa looked good. South Africa looked sober. South Africa looked like it has a conscience. We don't look like that. So
is it a reaction that we know it is not well thought through? Because you can see there's an eruption and immediately you see, yeah, there's a statement that has been just shunned out very quickly. And then we come to rule, you know, some of these statements that we do make will look bad, as you say. The same, it seems we're not learning from what also we had Ambassador Kimani projecting on the front of the United Nations Assembly regarding our stand on Ukraine and the principle of non-neutrality. So are we always quick off the mark, then we don't think through some of these statements that we put out? Because you see that particular circle of when the eruption of the war happened and the statement came out was a bit way too quick.
No, we must be conscious of who we are. That's the point we're making. It doesn't mean that we don't take positions as a country differently. We're Muslim, we're Christians, we take our position because we're human beings as well. We have our opinions. But when we come to the convergence of the national view, it must be measured. And doing that, it cannot be a knee-jerk reaction. We messed in Niger. We issued the longest statement on Niger, condemning the coup. It was the longest. It's now online to our ridicule. We wrote, I think, the longest statement on this attack. It was not necessary to have 2 pages of a Kenyan statement on Gaza. I mean, within that. Just a short statement would have done it. What is the point? We need to be a more strategic nation. We cannot be a knee-jerk nation.
So as a member of the African Union, are we aligning ourselves also with the statement of the African Union that this is the position of Africa? Or we, as a country as well, we have a different position and the African Union has a different position, as has been observed lately?
First of all, our hearts and mind goes to thousands of people and families who have lost their life on both sides, both in Israel and in Gaza. 6 years ago, I participated at a conference in Hebrew University that brought almost proportional number of Arabs and the Israelis together. And if you are in the middle of that conference, you will not know that there is a division, that there is a fight going on between these two people. And the conclusion in that conference, if I remember well, is our problem at the Zionists, the Zionists in Israel that are looking for separation between Arabs and the Jewish people. That is our problem. Now let's get back to this issue. Our colleagues have enumerated a number of issues that I thought are really pivotal. But the question is, Dubal, Israel is the most well-armed country in the Middle East, the most powerful in the Middle East. And by the way, Israel is the second largest air force in the world. I want our public to know. Then it has the best top secret service, both domestically and internationally. How did it happen? The quality, Dubal, of air, sea, and land that the Palestinian use was unhistorical. It has never happened. What connection did this have with Iran? What connection did it have with Russia? What connection did it have with the reapproachment of the Arab Middle Easterns that are converging together with Israel to create peace so that Palestinians and Israel can now have peace together. So there is a lot behind it, and our colleagues are right not to issue any statement which in the future is going to really tarnish the image of our country. There is a question that must be answered by both Israelis and Palestinians. The Oslo Accord is the only thing that is close to a law which was signed by both Israelis and also Palestinians. The response to the Israelis' provocation, the attack that the Hamas used against Israel, was no question, out of question. But the country, the Israelis, the Republic of Israel, have to be responsive to the situation right now, like our friends have already enumerated. If thousands of civilians and children are dead, they're going to be responsible. We're coming to a point where Bibi Netanyahu term will end, because that's what has happened in the past. Where was Bibi Netanyahu when all these things were being planned and happened right now? So there has to be a mind, and I like the statement that AU gave. It was very carefully crafted in order to bring a resemblance of African unity together, to bring peace in that land.
All right. In Hilton, we have Palestinians also who are saying that Israeli bombardment has been so heavy, they feel that they're living their own Nakba, which is the Arabic word for catastrophe that refers to the 1948 war of Israel creation that led to the mass dispossession. And of course, we shall tease out this as well, harking back to where this all began in 1948, and the warring factions has been going on. And on the sidebar there, or on the side of the split, you can see this is just a live picture there from the feed from Reuters. We're just keeping tabs on what is happening with the shelling that has been ongoing right now. This is the current state of play as well, with many lives being lost. But since we have a declaration of what from the Prime Minister that this was savage, the Minister says, of Defense, and it is